student recruitment agencies, and thank you so much for coming to our new networking webinar about St. Mary's University. And our speaker today will be Mr. Daniel, the Chief Ideas Officer, and together with him is Ms. April, Canadian University Application Center, and they work with many public and Canadian universities as well as other institutions. And I'm Jones, Marketing Specialist from Net24.
I'm just going to give an introduction about the Canadian University Application Center, or CUAC. So I'm one of the founders, and we started way back in 1997. That is probably well before the time most of you, but perhaps not all of you, got involved. And it was a time when there really wasn't much of an industry, you can say. And the real motivation we had was that we saw in our travels around the world, we had other professions. I was a lawyer in Toronto back in that time before we started this, that information and accurate, reliable information was really a big need amongst students and their families. And it's very interesting for me, more than 25 years later, to see that it's still a big need and still a big problem. And I'm fairly confident, at least most of you, if not all of you today, will learn something, and maybe something important, and maybe many things that are important. So given the big role that all of you have in the audience in terms of giving accurate guidance, it really takes me back to when we started. And this is something, because we've worked with dozens of institutions in Canada over the years, and they can often frustrate us or students by themselves not giving accurate information or not updating the information, not updating their websites. We tell them that we are the frontline people. You know, you in the audience, you're frontline. If a parent or student is frustrated because something changed or something isn't what you were told, you're the ones taking, and bearing the frustration of people. So this is something that motivated us and still motivates us. When we started, we developed a lot of protocols to properly screen people, which relates to what I'm talking about. Something we see a lot of is even intentionally misleading people who are looking to study in Canada. And it's not fair and it's not right. And so it's important that people, really know what's realistic. Today, I'm going to talk about budgets, for example. There's really no point for any of us ever to try and purchase something that we can't afford. And we all experience that. Some things are beyond budget. And that is especially true for people looking to do overseas study. But it's an extra issue because of the visa stage. So when it comes to the visa stage, this is a huge aspect for Canada, that there's a lot of scrutiny and focus on the proof of financial capacity. So based on our own approach, in 2010, the Canadian government, actually Immigration Canada, received a report from our National Universities Organization, and it referenced CUAC about 20 times as a model for student recruitment. So that's something. There's a link to the report on our website, and that's a very fast way of knowing that we have this recognition in Canada itself. If we look at why choose Canada, the first part that we always felt was important was education quality and the regulations around it. So I'm going to explain just very quickly some structural aspects. We have universities and we have colleges, and these are not the same at all. In the United States, someone will use these two words interchangeably. I'm going to college can mean I'm going to Harvard University. But in Canada, we don't use these words interchangeably. They're two different systems, and they're both controlled by our 10 provinces or 3 territories. There are two systems, but they have distinct objectives. Universities are more what you would know: bachelor's, master's degrees, often PhDs, and colleges, mostly diplomas, but it has become a little more confusing in the last years because colleges increasingly offer some bachelor degrees and even not so common master degrees. These are all reputable if they're publicly funded. And something else to emphasize is that there isn't much of a private university system in Canada. It would be rare. If I gave all of you in the audience a chance to name private universities in Canada, I would be surprised if I got many that were accurate. On the college side, college is not a regulated word. So really anybody could set up a small office and call it a college in Canada and it would be legal. They could not do that with using the word university. So there are very good private colleges and there are very bad ones as well. And this has led to many scandals in Canada where there are bad ones. So one has to be more careful. If it's public, generally the quality is going to be reliable. And just a note that when I say polytechs, that's talking about the college system as well. The colleges and polytechnics work together. There are small differences. But the main idea in colleges and polytechnics is they're more applied and less theoretical than universities. So they will be training people more for careers that are available or hot right now. And universities are going to be more theoretical. So another reason to choose Canada is generally the consistency of education quality, but you have to be a little bit careful. In terms of Canadian society and culture, many of you may know it's extremely multicultural, very welcoming of difference of all kinds. So that's part of the fabric of the country. And in terms of long-term opportunities, it's a country that's a little under 40 million, and it's the second largest country in the world. So it's really developing, and there are a lot of opportunities across Canada. It's a G7 economy with plenty of room to grow. But I also wanted to just briefly cover the why not choose Canada part. Again, in the spirit of giving accurate information, we're not trying to just market in a one-sided way. First, for some of your students, it's going to be too costly. That's just the reality, and it won't make sense. Secondly, Canada has commercialized a lot, but still not nearly as much as, excuse me, UK or Australia. So you may find a lot of students looking for a master in this or a master in that, and either Canada's not offering it because it's not looking to commercialize in that regard, or it offers it, but the standards are very academically stringent, and your student profile may not qualify. So, for example, for a lot of master degree programs, I'm talking about the ones with courses only, not thesis. Even a student with a low B average may not qualify. And then we have the fact that our professional programs are often second degree. So all of you will know, I would guess almost all of you in the audience, maybe all of you, recruit in countries where law or medicine can be applied for out of high school. As two key examples, in Canada, it's not possible. in my own case, like everybody else, I had to do a degree first before applying to law school. And that's also true with medicine. These are long processes. So you might have a student coming to you and say, I want to go to Canada for law, and she's just finished high school. And then you'd need to explain to her, well, you can't apply for it directly. If you want to do a bachelor degree in Canada and try later, yes. Otherwise, choose another country. So those are some why not, or maybe why not choose Canada issues. In terms of money matters, and I'm just still speaking generally here, scholarships are not so commonly offered in Canada or richly offered. So as a general proposition, if students are looking for a scholarship to cover everything, it's not the right country for that. It's better to apply to the small number of US universities which might give full scholarship for academics or even sports. In Canada, it's even more rare to get any big scholarship for sports. If it's a master or PhD, yes. If a student gets an offer to do a thesis under a professor, if it's science and engineering, they're richly funded usually, money for teaching and research, but otherwise not. So I don't generally recommend Canada without the funding. In terms of the work side, yes, any student who gets a study permit gets a work permit. She can work on campus, off campus, a lot of hours in any summer recess, but it's not realistic if a student's coming to you and saying, well, I'll work to pay my bills. Number one, that's not a strong proof for the visa. And number two, it's just too risky. It's very likely the student won't make it and will end up in trouble. And we have a lot of very sad cases of students who were having that expectation. It wasn't realistic. A big attraction for Canada is the post-graduation work permits. Any student who completes at least a 2-year certificate, diploma, degree, will be eligible for a 3-year work permit. That's fairly automatic if she applies within 6 months of graduation. And there are many streams for getting permanent resident status, but I won't call that automatic. A student has to qualify. Canada is the most aggressive country in trying to get young people to stay. It offers, a very huge number of spots, about 1% of our population every year. That means it's well above 300,000 new spots. They're not all for international students, but there is a special stream for international students. Now I want to switch more to talk about St. Mary's and use it as an example of what Canada's like and what you can expect. And I'll put it into context for all of you so you'll get an idea of to what extent it speaks more about Canada as a whole. This is an overview of Halifax. It's on the Atlantic Ocean. It's quite a picturesque and lovely city. If I switch to another viewpoint of Halifax, you'll see the ocean again in the background and the football field in the center of the campus. So what you're looking at is an overview of the whole campus area. I mentioned how large Canada is. This puts it into context. Halifax is pretty much the nearest university to Europe. It's about a 6 to 7 hour flight to London, depending on the direction because of the winds, which is about the same as flying to Vancouver. So that gives an idea of how huge the country is. Now, something I want to talk about that's very appealing at St. Mary's, and maybe even more so than most universities in Canada, is it offers something we call co-op, which is short for cooperative learning. all universities in Canada offer this, and the colleges and polytechnics offer versions of this as well. They're sometimes called internships. St. Mary's is unusual because it offers them across so many programs, not only science and engineering and business, but even in humanities and arts. So this is something students love because it gives them practical experience, and it's also very well paid. And so it generally is about 4 months in every 12 months, at least after second year, if not first year. So the earnings can be quite good, and it really prepares students for, launching their careers after graduation. It's also possible, and it's a strong point in St. Mary's, to get research experience, even as a third or fourth year student. I should mention, in Canada, standard bachelor degree is 4 years. It's not 3 years as it might be, for example, in the UK. And there's also fieldwork opportunities in the courses themselves. So what you're seeing as a photo there is the Bay of Fundy. That's actually ocean. You're looking at the ocean, but when the tide is out. So students in that course will go out to do field work there. Now, just to briefly go over the different categories of study at the bachelor stage, BCom has many different options you will see there. I want to say something about the appeal of undergraduate study in Canada. St. Mary's is a good example of it, but you'll find it across Canada. Students can mix and match their courses. So within BCom itself, of course, a student in first year will take 5, 6 different areas: accounting or finance, management, marketing. But she will also have what are called elective courses outside of business. And so these courses mean a student can personalize her study. One might want to take English literature, one might want to take French literature, maybe something in geography, maybe introduction to astronomy. So this is something I think is one of the most appealing aspects of studying, an undergraduate degree in Canada, is a student can really fashion her own course structure. And this flexibility is right into fourth year. If we go to Bachelor of Arts, you'll see, and this is quite typical of undergraduate programs in Canada, an enormous menu of options. So if you think about what I said just a moment ago, then imagine that students can be choosing electives across a huge range of courses. And what's very interesting and important to emphasize is it's very easy to switch streams. So with the exception of trying to switch into engineering, if a student didn't start there, everything else is very, very much possible. A student could start in computer science, take introduction to psychology as a first-year elective, and at the end of first year, decide to switch completely to psychology as a major. Or she could even combine them. The student could say, I want to keep my computer science major, but I want to minor in psychology and do a lot more study in that. Or there are combined majors as well. Many of you may know, you may not, that, for example, combining computer science with biology could lead to a focus in bioinformatics, doing DNA research later. So there are all kinds of official combinations that already exist, but a student can also make her own combination. Maybe she wants to do film in science because she wants to, rather than be a scientist, work for a company like National Geographic. And then if we switch to the School of the Environment, there are all kinds of majors in that field. And of course, Canada and Nova Scotia and Halifax being what they are, there's huge opportunity to do practical practical training of the kind I mentioned earlier, field work, for example. A student can do her own project, going out and doing studies in the environment. And Bachelor of Science, the more uncommon major would be astrophysics. St. Mary's has its own telescope, and the others would be, more conventional. When you see pre-professional stream or pre-health sciences, that's preparing students who want to apply to medical school. And that would give them the preferred courses that they should be taking for that. I do want to say our medical schools do take people who didn't come from the Bachelor of Science stream, but then they'll have to do a year or two of courses. So they would be admitted to medical school, but they wouldn't be permitted to start unless they made up those courses. But if someone came from a pre-health sciences stream, then they would have all the right courses. If I wasn't clear enough before, if one wants to pursue law after the first degree, any major is okay. It could be any major in any of the slides I'm showing you. They're all considered equally attractive to law schools. And if we go to engineering, in the province of Nova Scotia, there are a number of universities, including St. Mary's, which prepare students for the first 2 years, and then one goes on to finish the final 2 years, usually at Dalhousie University, which is about a 15-minute walk away. Something I want to emphasize that I think Canada is very strong in is the student supports. Academic advising, or St. Mary's has a Center for New Students, financial aid and awards. This is where students can get advice on what awards they can qualify for. We don't use the word scholarship in this context. Scholarships are what you get before you apply, but you can also win awards once you are there based on being a top biology student or someone recognized for improving school spirit, that type of thing. So you see there peer mentor and coaching, International Student Center, math skills. These are all ways for students to get help to improve themselves. Very, very important. The only thing I would emphasize, and it's very true about Canadian culture on campus, the students have to ask for help. So as a good agent, you need to be guiding the students. Look, when you come to Canada, it's not a place where there will be babysitting. It's a big leap, and people aren't coming to you asking if you're okay. But if you feel you need help in anything, including, how you feel psychologically, there's all kinds of help, but the students must ask for it. Student life, this is a very important part of the whole experience in Canada, is the campus spirit, the things to do. While the downtown of Halifax is wonderful, beautiful, fun, and it's only about a 15-minute walk, there's a lot to do on campus as well. And that includes playing sports, joining clubs, chess club, whatever it is. This is something we really value. This is just so you get an idea of what a dorm room would look like. Fairly basic, but everything a student needs. And then this is a sampling of some clubs and societies. It's only a small sampling. It's a very long list of societies, and one will find these in campuses across Canada. It's also possible for a student to start a club or society. So in our own work, as we've improved recruitment at one university or another from Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Ghana, then there might be student societies that grow up out of that. And after there's 5 or 10 or 20 or 25 students, they realize, oh, we can start our own club and get funding for that, because all students pay money towards funding these things. And in terms of sports, Canada equally emphasizes women's sports as well as men's sports. And we have two main distinctions, varsity and intramurals. So varsity is the really serious level, competing against universities across the province or region or country in national championships. And intramurals, it's competitions. It can be serious, but still mainly for fun within the campus itself. And then in terms of fitness classes or other things, that's not necessarily competitive, just for you to have fun or improve fitness. And then we come to the money part. The money part, of course, is a big area that I talked about earlier. St. Mary's is also, relatively speaking, within Canada, one of the most attractive when it comes to tuition price and scholarships. So they give a very large number of scholarships. They're not capped. In other words, they'll give it to everyone who has that proper average based on the system they come from. Of course, what an 80% is changes from country to country. Some countries, it's actually a 60, and others it can be a 90, depending on the structure. But what St. Mary's analyzes it to compare against is what it would be in Canada. And so students can get renewable scholarship, which can be 1,000 to 7,000. So that's something that is a big reason why St. Mary's is an institution that we in CUAC really prize and treasure, something very valuable. But I want to put that into the context of the tuition costs. So here I want to explain something about Canada as a whole. I mentioned earlier that it's mostly public universities, very few exceptions. And because of that, the tuition's completely controlled. There's no university, no public university in Canada can decide its tuition price. The province will control it and say, okay, this year you can raise it 3%, that's it. On the other hand, there's no province that regulates international tuition. So what you have is a system in Canada where almost anywhere a Canadian student would go, the cost of tuition will be pretty much the same. You name it, and I'll prove it to you that it'll be more or less the same. Quebec tends to be somewhat cheaper for Quebec students than the rest. That's somewhat of an exception, but mostly it's about the same. But when it comes to international, it can be double, it can be triple, it can be 4 times, it can be 5 times, it can be 6 times what a Canadian will pay. And that's without any meaningful quality difference. It just depends on what the market will pay. An institution in a very prominent city with a big name, it's going to charge a lot more, even though the quality of the program may well not offer anything different from one that charges far, far less. So this is something, a big factor as to why we think St. Mary's is in quite the sweet spot. But as you'll see, that doesn't mean it's cheap. Even if a student got a $5,000 annual award, okay, that's still leaving over $30,000. If she works part-time, September to April, maybe she can earn another $3,000. And if she works full-time in the summer recess, May to August, maybe she can earn $12,000, or sometimes more, sometimes a lot more. So there's still a fundamental funding need there, but at least it tends to show what might be possible for international students that have a fairly good funding support. And that brings us to questions then. Feel free to email me at the email address you see, but we want to open it up for questions now. For students who have O levels, if they're very strong, A's and B's. And depending on the program they want, it may be possible at some universities. So there's no clear answer to that you could say in Canada, all students could come with O levels, but there are instances, and that's an excellent example of what I'm talking about, that if we were to work together, we'd be able to guide you as to where it might be possible, if it might be possible. I do want to add a note here that I think is somewhat related. Sometimes you might have students, they're very keen on Canada. They don't quite have the budget coming out of high school for 4 years. You can guide them to start their studies in their home country. It could be Ethiopia, Sri Lanka, wherever, and then try to transfer. So Canadian universities do have transfer protocols for up to 2 years if the grades are good and if the courses match up. So some courses and some degree programs, they won't fit. They're in areas that might only relate to China or Indonesia, but not outside. But if they fit, if the grades are good, then students could also transfer. And I should just note to the audience, we do work in the master arena, and if we're talking about St. Mary's, it has quite a range of master degree programs. It's more complicated to place students in masters, but we definitely have a lot of experience in doing that.
Thank you so much, Danny. Then coming to the next question. Do you offer programs in French, or do you offer English programs to those who don't meet the minimum English requirement?
Sure. So if students are academically qualified, but they don't yet have the English proficiency standard, then there are what we call ESL programs, English as a second language programs. Some of them, if the student is at a high level, but not quite high enough, they're allowed to take 1 or 2 university courses as well. If students want to study French, they can also do it as degree programs. Some students are bilingual in English and French, and they may want to make French or French literature their major. I should just say, because sometimes people are confused about Canada, English and French are official languages. We also have Indigenous languages, but mostly French is spoken in the province of Quebec, and outside of Quebec, in the other 9 provinces or 3 territories, English will be the main language of daily life.
Oh, we get it. Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Jones.
Thank you very much, Danny. Thank you, April. I hope to see you again. Goodbye.